Hey, everybody, and welcome back. We've got another deep dive for you. By the way, if you're a startup founder and could use a little help, go check out Frederick AI. They're doing some really interesting work. All right, today we're going to explore this really interesting concept called founder mode. We're bringing in some incredible insights from Brian Chesky, the co-founder of Airbnb, and also a really sharp venture capitalist who's been watching this whole thing develop. Get ready to go deep. It's going to be fun. And I'm really excited to have expert speaker here to help us break all this down.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think this whole founder mode idea, it really throws a wrench into the traditional ways we think about leading, especially for startups.
Yeah. So let's just set the stage here. The big thing we're seeing in our sources is that tons of founders, as their startups begin to grow, they get this well-meaning advice, but it can actually be harmful. It's to switch into manager mode.
Right.
Step back, what the so-called experts take over.
This is suits.
Yeah, but that's where things get a little wonky.
Yeah.
That advice might not actually be the best thing for a startup.
Totally. This is coming straight out of the corporate playbook. And the thing is, it just may not work in the fast-paced, vision-driven world of startups. They're totally different animals.
Brian Chesky from Airbnb, he actually talked about this at a YC event.
Yeah.
And he was super open about how trying to work in that manager mode almost completely destroyed Airbnb.
Yeah. It really shows you what can happen when you try to force something that just doesn't fit.
For sure.
I thought it was so interesting that he looked specifically to Steve Jobs and the way he led Apple. It just makes you think, is there a whole different leadership style that actually works better for founders?
It's like he knew instinctively that there had to be a different way, a way that stays true to the founder's original vision.
Right.
And just look at Airbnb now. Their free cash flow margin is one of the best in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Absolutely. This kind of shows you how effective that founder mode approach, even if it's unconventional, can be.
And it's not just Chesky, right? The venture capitalist we're looking at has been paying attention to this trend. And they've seen so many founders share the same experience. Like trying to switch to that manager mode actually hurt their company.
I think what's really insightful is how they analyze why this happens. They make this clear difference between running a company you built from the ground up versus, managing one you were hired to run. They're worlds apart.
Yeah.
Completely different.
I mean, there's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Your baby, your vision, your everything, all your blood, sweat, and tears went into it.
Totally. And I think that's where founder mode steps in. It uses that deep understanding and vision that only a founder truly has.
And this is where it gets a little crazy. The venture capitalist says traditional business schools completely miss this whole founder mode thing.
Yeah.
They just don't see it. It's like a blind spot.
They're stuck in that traditional manager mode mindset. And it's a huge opportunity, though, to understand and really dive into this other approach to leading.
So let's talk about some of the possible, maybe drawbacks of manager mode, because
Yes.
it's not like founder mode is a perfect solution, right?
Right.
There's got to be some trade-offs.
Yeah. Well, the venture capitalist uses this analogy of modular design to kind of show the downsides of manager mode. In a modular setup, like every department, it's in its own little silo. And that can lead to a disconnect
Oh, yeah.
between what's actually happening, on the ground versus what the CEO is seeing. It lets problems just fester and grow unnoticed.
Yeah, it's like they're in their ivory tower and have no idea what's happening.
Exactly.
The venture capitalist also says that manager mode can lead to companies hiring what they call professional fakers who can actually end up hurting the company.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty harsh statement.
It is.
But it shows how important it is for founders to trust their own instincts and not just follow advice from people who maybe just don't get it.
It's not just about pressure from outside, though.
Right.
Right? The venture capitalist talks about founders feeling like gaslit while trying to fit into this manager mode box.
Yeah.
They get pressure from, advisors and their own employees.
Oh, it's got to be really tough being in that spot.
Totally.
You're doing what you think is best for your company, but everyone's telling you you're doing it wrong. That takes a lot of courage to stand your ground.
Absolutely. And the venture capitalist argues that often founders are right to trust their gut, even when it seems like everyone disagrees.
They've got this unique vision and understanding of their company that nobody else has. Nobody else can replicate that.
Let's shift gears back to Steve Jobs for a sec. Would you say that he's like the prime example of founder mode?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He was always pushing boundaries, challenging assumptions, making his own path.
What I thought was so interesting was that he had this annual retreat with like the 100 most important people at Apple. But get this, It wasn't always the people at the top of the food chain.
That's classic Jobs, right? He wasn't afraid to go against the grain.
It makes you wonder if that kind of approach can help even a huge company keep that startup vibe alive.
Yeah, it's a good question because at its core, I think founder mode is all about keeping that original spark going, that initial connection to the company's vision.
So to wrap up this first part of our founder mode deep dive, it seems like that traditional manager mode has some real limits, and this founder mode brings some totally unique advantages. But what we really need to do is understand better how founders can lead effectively.
It definitely gets you thinking, huh? What other examples are out there of founder mode, and what can we learn from them? I bet there are so many cool stories out there.
That's an awesome question. We're going to dig into that in the next part of our deep dive. But before we go, just a quick reminder, if you are a startup founder and need a little boost, go check out Frederick AI. They are doing some really cool stuff to help startups of all sizes. We'll be back soon to continue our founder mode journey.
You know, one of the things that really strikes me about this whole founder mode concept is how it really challenges our traditional ideas about leadership. You know, we're so used to picturing CEOs as these like detached strategic figures, you know, delegating tasks, overseeing things from a distance. But founder mode, it suggests this way more hands-on, almost instinctive approach.
Yeah, it's like founder mode requires this deep intuition, this understanding of the company's core that goes way beyond just numbers and metrics.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably why it's so hard for founders to let go of control, even as their companies get bigger. You know, they're not just running a business, they're nurturing a vision, a dream that they brought to life.
And it goes beyond just the founder too, right? There's this whole idea of building a founder mode culture within the company.
Right.
What do you think that actually looks like in practice?
That's a really great question. I think it all starts with hiring people who actually share the founder's passion and vision. You know, people who are willing to go that extra mile and really truly believe in what the company is doing. It's about creating this environment where everyone feels ownership and they're empowered to throw their ideas into the mix.
So it's less about strict hierarchies and more about creating a shared purpose and encouraging everybody to be creative.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those silos that we talked about before and promoting collaboration across all the different teams. It's about building a space where everyone feels good about challenging the way things are and pushing the limits of what's possible.
That actually reminds me of something the venture capitalists said about how founders are often seen as like eccentric.
Yeah.
Or even, worse. It's like they operate outside the normal rules of business, and that can rub some people the wrong way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where the magic of founder mode lies. It's about embracing that kind of out-of-the-box thinking, that willingness to take risks and go against expectations.
But there has to be some balance, right? We're kind of celebrating founder mode, but it's not a free pass to be reckless or just ignore good business practices.
No, of course not. It's not about throwing all caution to the wind. It's about being strategic and thoughtful while still staying true to that core vision and intuition.
So how about actually cultivating this founder mode within a company? Are there any specific practices or techniques that founders can use to foster this way of working?
One that comes to mind is transparency. Founders who operate in founder mode, they tend to be very open and communicative with their teams. They share their vision, their struggles, their successes, and it creates a feeling of shared purpose and even vulnerability.
So it's all about building trust and this sense of community within the company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that connects back to what we were saying earlier about hiring those people who share the founder's values. It's about surrounding yourself with people who are not just talented, but who are also aligned with the company's mission and culture.
Okay, so how about decision-making? How does that usually work in a founder mode environment?
I think it's less about top-down directives and more about working together to solve problems. Founders who operate in founder mode, they often bring in a lot of different perspectives when they're making decisions.
So it's about giving people at every level of the company the power to contribute their ideas and expertise.
Totally. And that can lead to some incredibly innovative and creative solutions that you just wouldn't get with a more traditional hierarchical approach.
And it helps prevent that disconnect we talked about, where the CEO is totally out of touch with what's happening on the ground level.
Right. By fostering open communication and collaboration, founders can stay connected to the pulse of their company even as it grows and changes.
This has been incredibly insightful, and I think it's so important for founders to really understand the power of founder mode and how to grow it within their companies.
I agree. It's a completely different way of thinking about leadership, one that embraces the unique strengths and insights that founders bring to the table and challenges those traditional ways of doing things.
So as we wrap up the second part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how founder mode might change as companies evolve and face new challenges. Do you think it's something that can be sustained long term?
That's a really great question, and honestly, there isn't an easy answer. It depends on so many things, like the kind of business, the personality of the founder, and the overall culture of the company.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Definitely not. But I think
Right.
those core principles of founder mode, things like vision, passion, transparency, and collaboration, those can be incredibly valuable no matter what stage a company is in.
And I think it's important for founders to remember that they don't have to do everything themselves. They can build teams of talented and passionate people who can help carry that founder mode torch forward.
Absolutely. It's about building a legacy, a culture that outlasts the founder and keeps driving the company towards success, even as it faces new challenges and opportunities.
Well said. This has been a truly insightful conversation. I bet our listeners are excited to hear about how founder mode plays out in real life.
Me too. There are so many compelling stories out there about founders who have embraced this approach and achieved amazing things.
And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive. We're going to look at some real-world examples of founder mode in action and discuss key takeaways that you can use in your own businesses. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into founder mode. Expert speaker. I am so ready to see how this all works in the real world. You mentioned some amazing stories. Let's hear them.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about founder mode in theory, but seeing it in action, that's where it gets really interesting.
For sure. So what are some of the most compelling examples of founder mode that you've come across? Besides Steve Jobs and Brian Chesky, of course.
Well, let's think about Elon Musk.
Okay.
You might have strong feelings about him one way or the other, but you gotta admit, he is like the embodiment of founder mode leadership.
Yeah.
He's so hands-on, involved in every single part of his company's design, engineering, marketing, sales, you name it.
He's definitely not afraid to get his hands dirty.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to, shake things up, take risks. He's always pushing the boundaries, whether it's electric cars, space travel, or AI.
Yeah, that drive, that unwavering belief in his vision, that's got to be a classic founder mode trait, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's that almost irrational conviction that helps founders get over obstacles and achieve things that other people think are impossible. It's like they can see the future even when nobody else can.
I'm also really fascinated by Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Oh, she's a fantastic example. Sarah just followed her gut and built this incredibly successful business, even though she had zero experience in fashion.
Yeah, it's like she saw this problem that nobody else was solving and thought, I can do this.
Exactly. And she did it her own way, using her creativity and resourcefulness. She didn't let the so-called experts tell her what was possible or not. She trusted herself.
That's such a powerful message for anyone listening, right?
Mm.
Don't be afraid to trust your instincts and forge your own path, even if it means going against the grain a little bit.
Totally. And don't be afraid to be scrappy and resourceful, too. You don't need a fancy MBA or a ton of funding to get started. Sometimes a great idea and the passion to make it happen, that's all you need.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into founder mode, what are some of the key things our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the first thing is there's no one right way to lead. What works for one founder might not work for another.
Yeah, it's about finding your own style, your own way of doing things that lines up with your vision and values.
Exactly. And remember, founder mode isn't about being a control freak or micromanaging everything. It's about staying connected to the heart of your company, building a culture of innovation and collaboration, and letting your team do their best work.
And it's about trusting your gut, even when everyone else says you're wrong.
Totally. Sometimes those crazy ideas, they turn out to be the best ones.
So to all the founders out there,
Yeah.
embrace your founder mode and go build something incredible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that brings us to the end of our founder mode deep dive. A huge thanks to expert speaker for joining us today.
It was great to be here.
And one last reminder, if you're a startup looking for some support, be sure to check out Frederick AI. They're doing fantastic work for startups, big and small. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep pushing those boundaries.